I want to thank everyone for coming to this press conference on the UA divestment campaign against Caterpillar and Motorola corporations over human rights abuses both in Israel-occupied Palestine and along the US-Mexico border. My name is Mariah. I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, and I'll be moderating today. First speaking will be Gabe, who wrote for the Arizona Daily Wildcat, where one of his articles first exposed the UA's relationship with Caterpillar and Motorola.
Thanks, Mariah, and thanks everybody for coming. It is true, I wrote the article in April 2009 that first publicized the UA-Cat-Motorola relationship, but it's very important to understand the context of that article and what was going on in the background. That semester, an ultimately successful divestment campaign was going on and prompted one of the biggest issues on campus that entire semester. I mean, I probably wrote every other article on the issue. And those of us in the main group that was sort of leading the campaign, the Sweatshop Free Coalition, we were targeting one of the U of A's largest contracts with the Russell Corporation, which is a subsidiary of Fruit of the Loom, for human rights abuses in Honduras that were well documented, not in dispute. And we did lots of things to try and get the university to drop the contract. This included bringing two Honduran labor leaders elected by their fellow workers to campus. We had a press conference not unlike this, and they held up the beautiful red, white, and blue U of A jerseys and went exactly through the sorts of abuses that they endured to make these beautiful jerseys that would end up in the UA bookstore. And everybody was there, even the president of the university, then President Robert Shelton. And everybody heard the testimony, which brought the speakers themselves, Norma and Mira, to tears. And the Daily Wildcat asked President Shelton, so what are you going to do about the situation? And he says, I'm going to sit and think about it a lot. I'm going to sit and think about it a lot. And that always reminded me of the closing remarks of Malcolm X in a famous debate at Oxford University in 1964. He said, if you sit around and you wait for the person in power to make up their mind to end injustice, you're going to be waiting a long time. And that's sort of what we're doing here. That's why we wanted to get together. We're not sitting around and thinking about this life and death matter. We're acting. And a dedicated struggle for 3 years of a divestment campaign modeled off of the successful one, which began that summer, July 2009, when the divestment boycott was announced of Russell. The article that came out in April exposed relationships with Cat and Motorola, and it's sort of a bunch of us were sitting thinking to start this campaign, and then launched it first thing in the fall. And there were the record of the campaign has produced some very interesting and somewhat unique precedents from a U of A faculty senate-based corporate relations monitoring board that where U of A officials publicly issued their quote-unquote grave concerns over the contracts based on compelling international evidence of the company's wrongdoing. It also included a dean of a college, the college that utilizes products by Caterpillar, to express even regret once the issues surrounding Caterpillar's role in Israeli human rights abuses were publicized. I mean, he said that had officials in his college known, they wouldn't have entered into this contract. Yet still, here we are nearly 3 years later, and the U of A is still not divested. It still retains these contracts with known human rights violators. I say known human rights violators because there were numerous letters, including one from the United Methodist Church, a New England Conference divestment task force, that went over the record of Caterpillar and Motorola's role in these abuses. Even the London Secretariat of Amnesty International, the largest human rights organization on earth, authorized one of its country specialists to come to the Arizona Board of Regents and testify on its documentation, which is probably the best in the world of over a decade of Caterpillar's role in these crimes. And she also said that like any actor, namely ABOR, has to consider its relationship with any corporation that commits human rights abuses. So I'm going to close with talking about how in the days following the Arizona Board of Regents divestment order on the U of A and ASU to divest $3.4 million in companies supporting apartheid South Africa in September 1985, that decision was made. The editorial board of the Arizona Daily Star ran an article that was entitled "An Act of Principle," with a subtitle that reads, "The Board of Regents could do no less than disinvest." The Board of Regents could do no less than disinvest. In the case of the U of A, it's not just unprincipled that the U of A has not divested. I mean, thinking of like many tiers of university policies, one of which is probably the most explicit is the University Policy and Corporate Relations, which states, quote, "The name of the university should never be used to endorse any products or corporations whose products are instruments of destruction or known to cause harm to humans." So it's not just unprincipled, it's also possibly illegal. Morally speaking, we believe it's simply criminal to continue to know full well what these corporations are involved in and to knowingly retain these contracts. And I'll just finally end by saying that we're in the presence of greatness, and I don't mean Professor Chomsky, like his greatness precedes him before he even gets here. I mean many of the people that are in this room are our elders in struggle. People like John Fife over there, was co-founder of the Sanctuary Movement and one of the leaders in divestments church denominations. John Miles, Muhyiddin Abdulaziz, Isabel Garcia. These are local people's heroes of resistance. And a lot of the people I just mentioned were deeply involved in the organizations that got together in Phoenix and Tucson, all over the state, Tucsonans Against Apartheid, Arizona Coalition Against Apartheid, Black Student Union at ASU, Students Against Apartheid. We've seen what they are able to do. It's an inspiring thing going through the microfilm in the basement of the U of A library and going through all of these articles and hearing what they went through and saw that they organized together and that they were able to win. And so will we. And so with that, I'm going to give it to the next speaker.
Following Gabe will be Raul, a community organizer with Corazon de Tucson and Southside Worker Center.
I'm an anti-apartheid, pro-liberation community organizer, or so I'd like to pretend I am, with Corazon de Tucson and the Southside Worker Center. Both are grassroots community groups organizing affected migrant families and workers that are at the front lines of this battle called Arizona. We are actively organized to defend our human rights and support one another in case of a detention or deportation. Additionally, we are targeting the large corporate interests that profit from our incarceration through a prison divestment campaign, which has striking similarities with the Palestinian struggle against corporate profiteering and human rights violations. Our targets are Wells Fargo and the Corrections Corporate of America. We envision a society that no longer finds solutions in immigration detention or the prison industrial complex. We seek justice, equality, humanity, and liberation truly for all. Thank you.
Preceding Professor Chomsky will be Yasmin, a media arts junior and club president of UA Students for Justice in Palestine. She is also one of the signers on the letter to UA President Sanders.
صباح الخير, اسمي Yasmin. Good morning, my name is Jasmine Alexis Moreno. Thank you all for being here. Growing up as a child, I was taught the beautiful language, culture, traditions, dances, tons of amount of food of the Arab background. My mother's side is Jordanian, and my dad's side is Palestinian. I've always been proud to be an Arab, and I always will be. However, at the age of 6, I was introduced to the Mexican culture from my stepfather who adopted me, changing my name from El Yatim to Moreno. Being able to grow up with different ethnicities made me more cultural as a person, which I try to display in my everyday life. I am proud to grow up in such a rich, beautiful ethnicity of the country of Palestine, and I'm proud to call myself an Arab. To boycott a company as a tactic to educate, I believe is something that needs to take place in today's society because of the fact that certain companies should not support the attackers and violators. Action needs to take a toll, and inshallah, God willing, we can educate, take action, and relieve the stress to become a free country, a free Palestine. There also needs to be a defense against attacks on Latino people and indigenous people here. I just want to close with a very, very short part of a poem that my friend had written for Palestine. No matter what race, religion, culture, or tradition, this is my mission. I'm the Holy Land to the Jews, precious to the Christians, and to the Muslims I'm sacred. No more oppression, no more poverty, no hunger, no hatred, no racism, no gun, no bombs, and most important, no more walls, so everybody can see the true beauty of me. Do you know who I am? I am their energy, their chanting, their voices, their screams, their rage. Ismi Palestine. Long live me. Thank you very much.
The particular focus, well, there could be others, but the particular focus here is on two corporations paying attention to their actions in the Israeli-occupied territories. As I said, there are other things one could discuss. For example, Caterpillar has the honor of being the first manufacturing corporation to use scabs, permanent replacement workers, to undermine a strike, to destroy a strike. That's, at the time they did it, it was illegal in all countries except South Africa and the United States. And one could talk about other things. But we're discussing now what they're doing in the occupied territories. There is no question that both corporations are intensively involved in destruction, displacement, in the case of Caterpillar, even killing a young American protester in the occupied territories, destroying villages, olive orchards, driving people out, putting up settlements, repression. In the case of Motorola, heavily involved in the repressive apparatus and security and so on. And there's also no question that all of this is illegal. I mean, that's by the highest authorities that exist in the world. That's been repeatedly established. UN Security Council years ago, 30 years ago, unanimously, with the United States joining in for once, which is rare, called on, condemned, deplored Israel's activities in the occupied territories, described them as a flagrant violation of the Geneva Conventions, the core of contemporary post-World War II international law, which forbids the transfer of populations into territories under military occupation, also for their actions destroying substantial areas in the occupied territories, cantonizing the remnants of the population, since then with a separation wall that snakes through the territories, and much else. And they called, the Security Council called on all states to refrain from any support whatsoever to anything that Israel's doing in the occupied territories. The United States is by far the most flagrant violator of this, far and away. This has been reiterated by the International Court of Justice unanimously, including the American justice in a separate declaration reiterated that anything done, Israel's doing in the occupied territories involving settlers or repression, dispossession is in flagrant violation of the Geneva Conventions, is a de facto violation of international law, implies that any participation in it is criminal. And the General Assembly of the United Nations, in fact, every relevant authority has said approximately the same thing. So it seems that if, in a complicated world, this is one of the few things that's essentially beyond discussion. Human Rights Watch recently called upon the United States to refrain from any aid to Israel that is in any way involved in Israel's activity in the occupied territories. In fact, Human Rights Watch even went beyond and called for a cessation of any aid which is involved in imposing discriminatory structures which are very extreme inside Israel. But we're putting that aside here. Amnesty International, as you just heard, has said approximately the same thing. So it's kind of universal. There's one exception, the U.S. government, which in fact has been blocking a political settlement for about 35 years, a separate story. But the question is what American citizens should do with regard to blatantly criminal activities, flagrant violations of the most fundamental principles of international law, both on the part of the Israeli authorities, the U.S. government which is supporting them, and in this case, two corporations which are intimately involved in the most destructive and repressive activities. And I personally don't see much of why there should be any debate about that, but that's the issue right now. The question is, should actions be taken of the kind that Gabe described to overcome these criminal activities in which the university, as you know, is participating?